I had a fantastic breakfast this morning thanks to the friend I was staying with. I even got a fruit salad. Of course, we're in Eastern Canada, so the milk is in a bag. Fortunately, the weather was not so cooperative this morning, but I made it. Now here's the map of the museum. Naturally, I started at the section with the steam locomotives. And you can get up real close. The CP 3100 and 3101 were known for being the most powerful locomotives in Canada at the time, but they were too heavy to run on most rails. This particular example ran from Toronto to Montreal. The CP 2858 is a Hudson-type loco, which were known for being very reliable, but a dream to operate. The exhibit also explains why steam trains fell out of fashion. In a word, economics. We also have here a card set that was used by machinists when repairing and making new parts. We now switch gears to the wonderful world of music. This is an electronic sackbut, the first musical synthesizer ever built. But the sackbut can only play one note at a time. Polyphone, as its name suggests, is polyphonic. Polyphonic means it can play many notes at the same time. Then we have some early radios and transistor radios. Again, we have an accessible exhibit with a touchable vinyl record. Vinyls use a physical groove that a stylus is dragged through to play the music. Now we move on to the Walkman. For those that don't know, a portable cassette player that uses a magnetic tape to store music. And finally the iPod. For the youngins, a portable music player made by Apple from 2001 to as recently as 2022. Though in 2022 they didn't look quite like this one. Now we move on to resource extraction and refinement, starting with the oldest minecart we still have from Canada. Being from 1867, it is as old as the country. And now we have an exhibit on what prospecting was like. This shows all of the elements that go into making a car. With all that extraction, of course, comes changes to the climate. Now we move on again to technology. We again have a blind accessible plaque here about some icons of a modern smartphone for calling, text messaging, playing music, and settings. Next to that are some old adding machines and computers, including a Commodore PET and an Apple Macintosh Plus, and some cameras. Again on the smartphone theme, we have a big collection of televisions. Now to our modern consumer culture. Throwaway living was, once upon a time, seen as a positive. And here we have modern advertising, suburban living, the family car, snowblowers and lawnmowers, the whole 9 yards. I have to say, I found that quite interesting. Now it's time to head to the Nature Museum. Luckily, the weather has improved substantially. This is a stroke, but I've seen worse. And here's our bus stop. With no shelter, I sure am glad the rain has stopped. Luckily, the bus didn't take too long to arrive. It's an older bus, but still plenty comfortable. And here we are. I certainly appreciate the architecture. This is a part of a skeleton of a horned dinosaur named Judith. It lived 76 million years ago. We've got plenty of other dino skeletons here, of course. Again, I'll say the architecture is quite something. Now, this is the Arctic exhibit. This shows some tools of the trade for whale hunting. Now, a section on mammals, why they have hair, how they protect themselves from predators, and so on. And of course, it wouldn't be a Canadian museum without a moose. And now, a special exhibit called The Man Who Planted Trees. This is a lot harder to film and impossible to record the audio. They give us these bone conduction headphones. Now that I'm done at the Nature Museum, I need to head to the History Museum. The bus would take well over half an hour, plus the wait for the first one. But the city has rental scooters that you can do the trip in 12 minutes, apparently. It turns out I picked up the wrong rental. I went with Neuron since you can rent a helmet with the scooter, unlike Bird. All rental scooters, to my knowledge, are geofenced to a region around the city, which really isn't my favorite way of doing things, but it is what it is. The thing with Neuron is that it is apparently only licensed in Ontario. If you go to the Quebec side in Gatineau, it stops you on the middle of the bridge. It's also not cheap. I personally much prefer our Bixi system in Montreal. I ended up having to walk across the bridge. Luckily, the museum is not far from the foot of the bridge. Anyways, I started off at the stamp exhibit. There are Star Trek themed ones depicting prime ministers and monarchs, depicting different regions of the country, and so on. Now for the main history exhibit, which starts off at the beginning of human habitation on the continent, with Clovis hunters, their spear points and canoes. Again, accessibility is present with a touchable model of a tobacco pipe here. And here's a book that Samuel de Champlain wrote about Canada and its people. And here's a silver cross from the end of the 18th century. And the plaque here is already too old to be accurate. The Hudson Bay Company is no longer in business. This gallery, on the 20th century and beyond, is dedicated to the Honorable Galen Weston. We start off in World War I and the conscription crisis. Here's how the provinces voted in 1917. Some things never change. Now on to the Great Depression and communist protesters. Interestingly, Alberta printed out prosperity certificates of sort of provincial money in those days. Now, this is before they discovered that they had oil. We have more conscription in World War II and propaganda posters. And here's a section on Tommy Douglas, whose provincial government introduced the continent's first single-payer universal healthcare system. And we have a section on Expo 67, the World's Fair that Montreal hosted. This is a sign about Terry Fox's Marathon of Hope that was raising funds for cancer research. And here we have two different views on Canada-US relations. One from American President John F. Kennedy, and one from Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And here we have an exhibit on Quebec in the late 20th century, about nationalizing hydroelectricity and so on. And this is an anti-bomb robot that was used during the October crisis. And here we have some artifacts from LGBTQ protesters in Canada. Well, that was a bit of a whirlwind tour. Luckily, this stop has a bus shelter. And the bus was air-conditioned as well. See you next time for the last 3 museums.